I don't know. I just got a sixth sense of humor. I just thought that was funny. Well, we're concluding our series. This is probably one of the shorter series I've done. Part 3 here. And today we're wrapping up this series, When God. And the point of this series, if you're just joining us, the point of this series is to remind us that we all have those times, all have those experiences in regard to our frustration with God. When it comes to unanswered prayer, feeling as if God's not really paying attention, and that's very, very common. And you don't have to lose your faith over those times. So today I wanted to ask you a question that all of us have asked, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you've been a Christian for a long time, or maybe you've just been a Christian a short time, or perhaps you may have kind of a Star Wars theology where you kind of feel like, yeah, there's a force somewhere out there. Even if you've had that, you've had this question. And here's the question. The question is simply this. Why doesn't God do something about that? Right? You have to fill in your own that. We have all kinds of that. Now, the interesting thing is about that is that you don't have to think very hard to come up with a that, do you? Some of you are thinking, some of you are sitting next to your that. No, I hope not. Some of you work for that. Some of you work with that. Some of you have a cubicle right over next to that. Some of you are in a homeowners association with that, right? Whatever it might be. And of course, then there's the bigger that's of life, the crime and the illness and the injustice and all of that around the poverty around the world. So there's something, and we say, God, why don't you do something about that? Because look at that. That needs your attention, and I don't know why you haven't done something. If you have ever felt like, hey, God, why don't you do something about that? And it might be very personal. All right, we've done this each week. If you've ever felt that way, raise your hand. Okay. No, I'm raising my hand too. I'm not just illustrating. I'm actually raising my hand. So wait, keep them up and then turn around because we want to encourage ourselves, okay? All right? Okay, so it's pretty much, yeah. Now, does that make you feel better? Because don't you feel sometimes really unspiritual? Sometimes I'm thinking, wow, I'm a pastor and I feel like that. But hey, there's some that's in our life and we think, why doesn't God do something? Now, when we watch television, we'll see things happen and we'll go, God, why don't you do something about that? And then the news goes to another story. And, we don't lose a lot of sleep over that. But when it becomes a personal that, then that's kind of a different deal. And you need to know that you and I, we can maintain our faith. We can believe. We can press on. We can keep on keeping on. Even though you don't understand, why doesn't God do something about that? Or that, or that, or that. Why doesn't God do whatever it is? You can maintain your faith. Now, interesting, when we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was so concerned about this question, he didn't teach on it. He was so concerned about this very issue that instead, Jesus actually created a that. He created a that where people would say, hey, why doesn't God do something about that? He created one. And when he didn't do something about that, that's how we know and learn how to respond. When God doesn't do something about the that we think he could and should do something about. Jesus created a real-life illustration full of drama and questioning so that we can continue to believe even when you look around and you ask, why, God, don't you do something about that? Now, the story we're going to look at is in John 11, and I gave it to you on your insert. You're going, wow. Usually it's lots and lots of points, verses scattered throughout. But I wanted us to take a look at a story. And if you open up your Bible, don't look at the heading. And some of you already know the story, so you're thinking, I know how this ends, and it's familiar. But I want you to, if you can possibly, take a fresh look at this. We're going to walk through this together. That's really going to be our journey together. I'm going to give you some points at the very end, but we're going to walk through this together. See, when John wrote this, the people who were reading it for the first time didn't know the end of the story, did they? The people actually in the drama, in the story, in the event, the actual historical event, they didn't know how this was going to turn out either. And there's so much emotion, and you'll see that in a way. You and I are in this story. God puts us in this story. And now before we dig into the story, let me explain what we've done in this series, because I think that'll be of help to you. First, we've discovered that no matter, again, where we are in our spiritual lives, we all have those times when we feel like God is either inattentive or uncooperative or late. So we're looking at the lives of three people, three men in the New Testament that we absolutely know that Jesus knew, loved, cared for, really lifted up as an example to us, and were people that God said, I've got a purpose and a plan for you, and they fulfilled that. They did what they were supposed to do. And yet, all of them had times when they wondered if God was being inattentive, like John the Baptist, if he was being uncooperative, like we saw with Paul, or late, as we'll see today. Now, what we're talking about today, and in this whole series, let me say this. You've probably found it's not very emotionally satisfying. Sometimes you'll walk out of a message and you'll go, wow, it just makes me feel better. I just feel better and I feel, I'm motivated or I'm stirred or whatever. And this series hasn't been that way, has it? Because it's really not something that we really think, wow, I was feeling discouraged. Now I'm really feeling encouraged. Emotionally, perhaps you've left this message in this series. It doesn't necessarily help you feel better, but in those dark moments when your faith feels like it's just hanging by a thread, and you're wondering, can I really believe God? Can I really trust him? Is he really concerned about me? You need to know that people who God deeply, deeply loved, Bible people, right? That he deeply loved, that he cared about so much, he allowed them to go through the same things that you and I go through. And with the results and the outcomes that they would not have picked for themselves. And he still loves them, and he still loves you, and he still loves me. And imagine, if you can, that you're hearing this story for the very first time. Now, we're John chapter 11. I'm going to display it for you here. It's all printed there for you. And since it was so big, I tried to make the numbers so that you could read it. But I hope you can. But if not, it's going to be displayed. And we're going to kind of walk through this together, okay? John chapter 11. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. So they lived not even 2 miles away from Jerusalem. And then John gives us a little explanation that may not mean a lot to us, but sure meant a lot to them back in that day when they heard this story for the first time. This Mary, because there was a lot of Marys. Mary was a very popular name. So it says, this Mary, whose brother Lazarus lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Now, in the first century, when people read that, they go, oh, that Mary. Everybody knew the story about the whole, perfume on Jesus' feet and so forth. Everybody knew about that story. That went viral, that's right. So it helped them. This really helped the people know which Mary that John was talking about here. Verse 3, so the sisters sent word to Jesus. Now, Jesus isn't very far away. Right now, where he is in particular, he's about a day and a half away, they estimate. Not that far. That's walking. So look at the word they sent. Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, I just got to pause. How would you like to be known as the one that Jesus loves? Right? Wouldn't you love that? It's like if you're at a party and your name tag, you just write on your name tag. Oh, yeah, they'd see your name tag. Oh, you're Lazarus. We know about you, right? Wouldn't you love that? So who are you? I'm the one that Jesus loves. Yeah, we've heard about you. Wouldn't that be great? They didn't even say his name. Lazarus. Lazarus, Mary and Martha, related? That's just, no. Lord, the one that you love is sick. Oh, yeah, we know you. Now, we know that Jesus loves us, but also he's really making it clear Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and all they had to say was, hey, the one you love, your close friend, this person you really, really care for, he's sick. And Jesus knew right away. That's a lot of love. That's very, very clear. They sent this message to Jesus. having seen him heal strangers, they saw him heal Romans, they saw him heal Gentiles. They had seen Jesus stand out in the hot sun where a line of people were there and just heal. Yes, you're healed, you're healed, you're healed. And they're just all of these big, long lines of people over and over, spend all day healing people Jesus didn't know. Of course, he knew them because he was God, but not in a relationship like he had, like it's reflecting here about Lazarus. But this was one that Jesus loved, so they sent word to him. Makes sense. Verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus says, this sickness, it will not end in death. No. Now, I got to stop and say here, Jesus creates for us a whole brand new category. This is a whole new category for some of us. No, that sickness is for God's glory. Wait a minute. Sickness for God's glory. Yeah, it's a whole new category. God, why again is Lazarus sick? For my glory. But sickness is a bad thing. You know, how can you use a bad thing like that? But this sickness is for my glory. Okay? So that, going on, here's the purpose statement, so that God's Son may be glorified through it being the sickness. Now, honestly, I was never taught this in Sunday school. We probably aren't teaching the kids downstairs. It's like, good, now kids, when you get sick, sometimes that's for the glory of God. I mean, how do you teach them that? So I never really learned that. This is a new that, isn't it? I'm about to give you some light in your darkness and some hope where you feel there's no hope. Now, John's writing this story, and he realizes that this is about to take a crazy turn, this whole event. So before John tells us what's happening next, he kind of gives us a little commentary, a little background, of what's going on here. So John tells us what happens next. He gives us some commentary so that we kind of don't stop reading and we think, because what would we do if we wrote the end of this story? We'd say, oh, I got word. This is somebody Jesus loved. Jesus went, healed him, the end. No, but he says, now, again, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. John, why are you telling me that? I'm telling you that because you aren't going to believe what happens next. In fact, based upon what Jesus does, you might conclude that Jesus didn't care about them, that he didn't love them, and that he doesn't care and love them like it says here. So hang on to that because you're not going to believe it based on what happens next. I got to tell you, John's saying, I got to tell you, the one Jesus loved, yes, let's make it really clear. Jesus loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So, verse 6. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Wait. You just said that you love him, that Jesus loved him, and even if he just loved Mary and Martha, and didn't love Lazarus, I mean, that would be kind of a merciful thing to them. I mean, they're nursing him back to health and trying to help him, whatever. I mean, or maybe he didn't really care much for Mary and Martha, but he was really close to Lazarus. I mean, just to be able to watch out for him. But it says he loved all 3 of them. But he stays 2 more days. And the disciples were there with him when he got the message. And I'm sure, they get the message from whoever was sent and said, hey, the one who you love. Yep, Lazarus. Oh, the disciples. Oh, Lazarus, yeah. He's sick. I mean, really sick. And you need to come quick. And so I'm sure the disciples, they're probably sitting there and go, okay, let's go. Let's start packing up. Jesus goes, no. Wait. We're not going anywhere, guys. Wait, just hang on. It says, and then he said to his disciples, after a couple of days, they waited, let us go back to Judea. Now the disciples say, but Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, do you ever remind God of stuff? Because, in case he's forgotten. Because, he's only God. But, he says, you may not remember this, but you remember back what happened in Judea? Remember it? And of course he remembers it vividly. The Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back. Implication? If they try to stone you, because we hang around you and we're generally close, if they miss you, boom, they're going to hit us. So we really don't want to go back toward Judea. And the Jewish leaders did want to totally eliminate Jesus. They wanted to kill Jesus, get rid of him. And the disciples, the disciples act like they're trying to protect Jesus, but honestly, the disciples were more concerned about themselves. And then Jesus does what Jesus always did. And when I read things like this, it encourages me because I know no human being would make this up. People, have you ever heard that statement? They say, the Bible is a book that no man would ever write if he could. I mean, and this is one of those instances. Because this doesn't help the story or help the people believe or help authenticate the fact that this is actually happening in history. So there they are. They're there 2 days, and they've forgotten about Lazarus, probably the disciples by now. It's like, oh, well, okay, whatever he says. And then Jesus says, okay, guys, load it up. We're going to Judea 2 days later. And the disciples think, but wait a minute. If we go back there, that's it. We're going to get stoned. And then, verse 9, Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? What? Huh? You read this story. I mean, think about what the disciples, they're hearing this for the first time. I've read this several times and I still go, what? Weren't we just talking about Judea and let's not go there because we're all going to die? And Jesus, what are you talking about? And in this moment, Jesus does a little teaching, but they have no idea what he's talking about. And when you see the whole story, and you read the whole book of John especially, then you really catch what he's talking about. It becomes evident what he is saying to them as we go on. Those who walk in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. Okay, still don't get it. Verse 10, it is when people walk at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Ooh, that's profound. Still have no clue what you're talking about. What's Jesus talking about? There's 12 hours of daylight. What Jesus is trying to get to his disciples to realize is just the concept of opportunity. See, when the sun is up, you can see and you have opportunity. Now, we don't see that as much in our culture because we've got lights all over the place. But in this culture, they could really see the analogy there. When the sun's up, you can see opportunity, you can have opportunity. When the sun goes down, you lose opportunity. And Jesus is saying, guys, you can stay here if you want. If you want to stay, but I'm not going to be here very long. Eventually, I'm going to leave this earth. I'm going to leave this planet, and the light goes out. And you're back in darkness. Your opportunity with me, to be with me, to hang with me one-on-one like this is a short window here. And you need to learn all you can and experience all you can. And if you guys follow me to Judea, I'm going to give you a candle of light, so to speak, that you can carry with you the rest of your life. You carry it through the darkness of life, those difficult times of life. Because I'm about to introduce you to something that you won't learn any other way but coming with me. So while you have the opportunity, follow me to Judea. And look, he said, it says, Jesus said, look, I know you're afraid. I know you're concerned. I know you don't want to die. I know that. But if you stay here, you're going to miss the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm about to give you that light to serve you the rest of your life and your ministry. But when I leave this earth, the light's out. The opportunity to show you what I want to show you ends. So let's go. And after that, verse 11, after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. Well, then here's the disciples' opportunity to give God some medical advice. Well, because, they still don't want to go, right? They don't want to go to Judea. They decide to give him some medical advice. They say, his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Let's not go and bug him. He's probably sleeping. It's nice, Why wake him? See, he's going to get better, and that's all it, And you probably have too. I've given God medical advice, right? Lord, all you need to do is, with this surgery, all you need to have happen is, or Lord, lead us to the right doctors because, And I'm not saying don't pray. You should pray. We should all pray when we're having difficulties physically, whatever. But the disciples weren't concerned about Lazarus. That's what we have to understand. As much as they were not getting killed. That was their big concern. Verse 13, Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And then Jesus makes what sounds like the most insensitive statement a person can make. I would never say this if I'm going to a hospital call or whatever, doing a memorial service, funeral, whatever. I'd never say this. It sounds very insensitive, and it helps me know that no one would ever make this up. Because if you're trying to make the case that Jesus is really loving and caring and is God and all that, you don't have him say stuff like this. Verse 15, he says, so he told, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad. He said, I'm glad I was not there. Wait a minute, you knew? Wait, you knew he was going to die? Yep. Wait. You let Mary and Martha nurse their poor brother. They're sitting by the bedside, and they're, got rags, and they're going through all of this, and you knew he was going to die? Yep. Jesus, you mean you didn't go on purpose? Yep. And you're glad we weren't there to save the one that you love? I mean, we know you love him. We've seen you. We know you love him. Yep. So I'm sure they're thinking, what could be so important for us to learn that you would let the very one you love die? What could be so important for us to learn? He says this, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So it's so valuable to you, Lord, for us to believe in you, that you would allow someone to die, someone you love, someone very precious to you, a very close friend. You would allow someone to die to bring us to full grown-up faith. Yes, it's that important. To Jesus, it's that important. Yeah, so isn't that like a whole new category? I mean, to me, this is like, really? I mean, you have to do this? And that just wrecks our theology for some of us, doesn't it? Jesus created a that. Jesus, why don't you do something about that? Now we're going to stay a couple more days here. He does that so that we can understand what God is doing when God doesn't do something we think that God should be doing something about, right? Then Thomas, and this gets funny. To me, this really gets funny. Do any of you ever remember Eeyore in the Winnie the Pooh? Right, Eeyore? Okay. He's always moping, and life's bad, and nothing to do, and no hope of getting any better. That kind of thing, right? Now, if you have more than 3 kids, you have an Eeyore in your family, probably. We have one in our family. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You'd probably not guess it. But life is difficult, and oh boy, maybe you married Eeyore, I don't know. But so it's all bad. It's all bad. In the group, that's Thomas. Okay, then Thomas, also called Didymus, says to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." All right. We're all going to die. Load it up, guys. It's all over, right? Lazarus is dead, and when we get there, the people are going to stone Jesus, and then we're with him, so they're going to stone us. It's going to be a massive slaughter, and so let's go and die with Lazarus and Jesus. That's what he said. He's trying so hard to sound like the devoted disciple, but he doesn't want to go. Verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, we have to stop and realize the drama of this moment. Back in this day, Lazarus was dying. He was dying without medication. We don't even know. They didn't know what he was dying of, certainly. And they had sent a message to Jesus. And Mary and Martha and Lazarus are at bedside. And you can imagine, you've got a relative, you're sitting at the bedside, you're helping them, encouraging them, rubbing their arms, putting cold rags, whatever you're doing, and you're saying, it's okay. Jesus is coming. We've called for him. We know he got the message. Everything's good. It's going to be fine. Just hang in there. Hang in there, Lazarus. He's come, right? Because can you imagine? I mean, why wouldn't they say that? They're encouraging. They got the message to him. The messenger didn't bring back message to Mary and Martha and said, nah, Jesus said he's feeling pretty good where he is and he's just going to hang out for a while. They were hoping, anticipating, and planning. Don't worry, we sent for Jesus. They're watching out on the road. They probably had friends. Hey, neighbors, would you watch out? If you see Jesus, would you come let us know? Because we want to see him right away. This is getting close. This is getting very, very important. And but Lazarus, don't worry. Just relax. Hang on there, buddy. Jesus is coming. I mean, you can think they've seen strangers healed. They've seen Gentiles healed. They've seen Romans healed. So certainly he's going to come and heal somebody he loves. And we have absolute faith that Jesus is on his way. And they waited and they waited. And the community waited and waited. And Lazarus died. There by his bedside. And one day, he's dead. That's it. And still no Jesus. And finally, people who, handled bodies back then finally said, look, we've got to bury him. We have to bury him. And they watched or maybe even participated in wrapping Lazarus, much like they would wrap Jesus not too long after this. And they placed Lazarus in a tomb and probably sealed it up, and they began to mourn and know Jesus. I mean, isn't that where we live sometimes? Isn't that the inattentive, disinterested, hey, I thought you cared about me, God, that we sometimes struggle with, honestly? And Jesus creates a that so that we could carry hope into our future. Now, what's important is the 4 days is an important thing for the first century. In the first century, they believed that the spirit of a person hovered around the body for 3 days. And when the face finally began to change, because of what happens to bodies, they believed then that was the indication that the spirit had left. That there was no hope of them ever being able to go and, inhabit that body anymore. And so they would look down, can't inhabit this, so we're out of here. And so that was a superstition. So there's no hope even with their superstitious way of thinking. No hope for Lazarus. Already been dead, in the tomb 4 days. Now, can you imagine how embarrassing it would have been for the disciples to follow Jesus into Bethany? I mean, the little crowd, sometimes they were kind of, got a little bit of fame and so forth. And, hi, everybody, hi. I mean, can you imagine the scowls? Yeah, where were you 4 days ago, Because I'm sure everyone was staring. I mean, what an insult, okay? He didn't come and heal the guy. But he also, this person who Jesus loved, he wasn't even there for the funeral. They didn't even help us take care of the body. Lazarus is in the tomb 4 days, and here he was, and here he's got the nerve, I'll say it that way, he's got the nerve to step foot in this little town. Verse 18, now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Now, throw this out. Why do you think Mary stayed home? I mean, we're just guessing. But any thought? Why do you think? She's mad. That's what I think too. I think she's mad. Lazarus is dead and buried. Why not go out to meet him? I'm just guessing she is mad. Or at least deeply, deeply hurt and disappointed. If we don't like the word, saying she's mad, I think she's upset. I think they had a close enough relationship where she's mad. Are you have a close enough relationship with God so that you can get mad at him and it be all right? I hope you do. He can take that. She feels like, Jesus, you could have and you should have. And I know, they're thinking, I would have for you. Mary and Martha thinking, we would have done this for you. If you had given us word that you needed us, we would have dropped everything and we would have come. And here, we gave you every opportunity, and you said you love us, and you seem to love us, but you seem to love and care for strangers more than you love us. I mean, you seem to love Gentiles more than God's chosen people, your own people. But Mary stayed there. But Martha ran out and said what we would have said, maybe. Verse 21, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. God, this is your fault. Verse 22. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She's saying, yeah, I know. You don't have to give me a theology lesson. This is the moment when people try to comfort you. You ever been in a situation, you've lost somebody close to you? Well, they're in a better place. Why does it? Yeah, I know, but that's not what I need right now, Or we're going to see them again. And that is a comfort that was a comfort, but we still feel that agony. So Martha thinks, he's just making some theological statement, but she's thinking, you don't need to give me a lesson. I know, but Jesus, you should have been here. Then Jesus looks at her and says something we'd never expect anyone to say, unless he was crazy, or an imposter, or the Son of God. He looked at this hurt, emotional, confused woman who he loved. And he loved her brother, and he thought she knew who Jesus was, and he says to her what he says to you and me. He says this, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He's saying, Martha, I heard your answer, and really, you think resurrection is an event, and it is. You think resurrection is in the future, and it is. But Martha, look at me. I am the resurrection and the life. Who would say that to somebody who just lost their brother? Some of us here, we've gone through a recent loss here. Who would say that? Jesus did. And he says, anyone who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And when he asks her a question, he asks this question of every one of us. This is a question that Jesus asks of us. He asks a question that will mean different things at different stages of our life. He asks a question that was maybe really easy to believe when we were 6 years old, and really easy to believe when we were 12 years old, but when we got a little bit harder when we were 22, and a little bit harder when we were 35, or when you're burying somebody you love, or you're watching a loved one suffer, or you're going through just a heart-wrenching, difficult period of your life. And Jesus looks at her in the eyes and he says, do you believe this? Do you believe this? Martha, even with all that you're just experiencing, knowing I have kept this from happening, do you still trust me? Do you still believe I am who you thought I was, even though I haven't acted like who you thought I was? Based upon who you thought I was and what you were expecting me to do? Isn't this amazing that Jesus would set this up? And not just for their sake. Understand really importantly, my friends, it's for us too. This is for us to know what happens when God feels like he doesn't show up or that he doesn't care. She says, yes, Lord, she told him, I believe that you, and when he talks, she goes into her own little theological explanation, almost like she's reciting a catechism kind of thing. She doesn't know what to think at this point. I didn't really follow all that resurrection and the life stuff, but, I'll tell you what I believe. And she says, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. She goes, I imagine, he wants to talk to me? I'll talk to him. Right? Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him, right? Just outside of town. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, and basically they have the same conversation that, Martha had. She fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Lord, why didn't you stop this? You could have stopped this. I know you could have. Why didn't you? And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And Jesus then asks a question he, of course, knew the answer to. He says, "Where have you laid him?" He said, "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And either on the way there, because he's just outside town, either on the way there or once he got there, John records something for us that is astounding. And it helps us to know that even when we're going through the most difficult times, and you all know, and I know that God knows how everything's going to turn out, right? We know that. But even when we feel like God could have and he should have, but he didn't, and he chooses not to, but he really should have, and it's not because, he's distant, and God has the ability to enter our deepest pain, even when he chooses to do nothing about it. Do you hear that? He knows about our pain, even when he chooses to do nothing about it. And Jesus paused, knowing exactly what was about to transpire. Jesus knew how this story would end. But he looks around and he sees these people hurting. He looks as Mary and Martha sees the hurt and the agony they've gone through. And for your sake and for mine, Jesus wept. It's as if Jesus was letting us all know, I'm not too almighty to understand. That's why I came. That's why God came in the flesh. And when you suffer and you don't understand and you feel abandoned by God, it's as if God leans into your world and he says, I know. Then the Jews say what we would say. They say, see how he loved him. And even as Jesus was standing outside the tomb, mourning the loss of his friends, verse 37, but some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Answer, sure. What are they saying? Why didn't he do something about that? Jesus, then verse 30, Jesus once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across the entrance. Take the stone away, he said. Now that really, they weren't expecting. They were already confused. But Lazarus was completely dead and gone. And surely they knew they would see him hopefully one day in the resurrection, and that they're trying to comfort themselves with all of that. And they really didn't understand. But here's Jesus telling them to open the tomb. But Lord, said Martha, and she's trying to be delicate about this. Because this is, the sister of the dead man. By this time, there is a bad odor. Again, giving Jesus kind of some lessons. He has to be reminded of this. He's been in there 4 days. Remember Jesus? Remember we called you and you decided to stay? Just to kind of keep you up to speed here. I think she's kind of twisting the knife a little bit. He's been in there 4 days, count them. Jesus, not only did you not come to heal him, but you didn't show up for the funeral, and it's been 4 days. You were close by. 4 days. Then Jesus said, and again, I think he says this to you and me as well, all of us. Did not I tell you that if you believe, if you will trust me, if you place your weight on me, you will see the glory of God. So Jesus, wait. This thing is really about you? This is all about your glory? This is all about whether or not we can trust you, especially when we think that, this thing that we think you're going to do or should do, that you didn't? You mean this is about your glory? And Jesus says, I told you that if you keep your eyes on me, if you keep your eyes open, if you continue to trust me, and you continue to believe, and if you keep on, if you continue to live your life as if I am who you know I am, you will catch a glimpse of my glory in your difficult times. Verse 41. So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, and Jesus looks up, and basically here's the prayer he prays. He basically prays, God, you and I know what's going to happen. And we know how this is going to end up. But these people don't. And so I'd like you to have them see me talking to you about this, and when they see all of this happen, they won't say, oh, Jesus, because I'm really here to glorify you. So instead, I'd rather have them say, oh, Jesus and God, because this is really about you, and I'm here only to reflect and glorify you, and I'm about to reflect you in a very, very big way, and so, they've seen me. Well, watch the prayer. Father, and he's praying this loud enough everybody can hear, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. Follow this? This is about me so that they can see you. And Jesus, you're telling us that it's worth all of this drama and all of this pain and all of this emotion for people to understand your connection with God. And Jesus says, absolutely. I have no doubt it's worth it. When he had said this, verse 43, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now, do you know why Jesus had to say, take off the grave clothes? Because nobody was coming near him. I mean, this is creepy, right? You know, what's he going to look like? We're going to unwrap him and, it's going to be zombie. I don't know. What's it going to look like? They're not getting near him. Nobody's making their move toward Lazarus. They just see him as, kind of a scary scene. They're, no way, I'm not going to unwrap him. They all are standing there. So it says, somebody, let him go. He's alive. Now, here's the understatement. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him. I bet they did. You raise somebody from the dead, and you're going to make a stir. I bet every person in the town put their faith in him. And some of you would say, how could they not? This story spread, and he didn't just heal somebody or raise somebody from the dead that they may have, it wasn't just somebody who may have been asleep or conscious or in a coma or whatever. This guy had been dead 4 days. There is nothing he can't do. So why doesn't God do something about that? Here's the answer to our question as we conclude. Again, this may not be very emotionally satisfying, but follow me on this. Number one, we don't know sometimes. It's like, Pastor, you studied all week to come up with that? Why doesn't God do something about that? I don't know sometimes. Sometimes we just don't know. But here's what we do know. Because of that day in Bethany, because of the story we just read together, that whole thing with Jesus and some of the people he loved, what we need to see is number two, he can. Jesus can. But number three, sometimes he waits. That's the hard part. But, number four, we can trust him in the meantime. Why doesn't God do something about that? I don't know. But I know he can. And I know sometimes he waits. But I know for sure that I can trust him in the meantime. And I know that I can trust him in the meantime because he promised me this promise when he said, if you believe, you will see the glory of God. He just said that. Did I tell you? If you believe in me, you'll see the glory of God. If you believe, if you continue to trust, if you continue to maintain hope, if you continue to focus in the midst of all the worst things that's happening in your life, and some of you are going through a terrible time or just come through a terrible time, God's willing and God is able to leverage that, all of that hurt, all of that difficulty, all that delay, when God seems so late, he's leveraging that for his glory. And again, that may not be emotionally satisfying, but boy, it's the thing that God has given us to hang on to in the midst of those dark times. This is the candle, the light that he handed his disciples, because he knew that there would be a time when they would watch him, Jesus, get arrested. And they'd watch him get tried, and they'd see that he got beaten, and they'd hang Jesus on a cross, and they'd watch him die, and there'd be no hope. No hope. Our hope is gone. And yet they would remember, why would God allow that? They see their Savior, their Messiah, hanging on a cross. Why doesn't God do something about that? And he did. He paid for the sins of the world with that. He did that for us, see? Makes all the difference in the world. Let's bow.